Let's speak to Jonathan Davis, economist and wealth manager. Jonathan, you were gobsmacked when you heard from the IMF. Is that right?
It's typical nonsense from the mainstream economists and the organisations which basically got us into the problem in the first place. I mean, the United Kingdom government is borrowing about £100 billion a year in order to pretend that everything's okay. We're digging ourselves every single year a bigger and bigger hole. So to suggest that we should have more austerity when we haven't actually had any, given that our current spending rises year after year after year, is arrant nonsense.
And yet we look around and we see police officers complaining that they're being cut. We heard something about that on the news. All kinds of cuts left, right and centre. That's all we ever hear about.
It is all we ever hear about. So how come we don't hear that we are going to be spending this year £675 billion, next year £720 billion, in a few years' time £765 billion, and yet the government's tax take is between £50 and £100 billion less than that? My point is, we already owe £1,000 billion. We're adding to that £50 or £100 billion a year. It is totally unsustainable to suggest that we can continue with that level of debt and still continue on the same level of earning and spending that we had in the last decade is mathematically impossible.
So if you were in charge,
we need to grow up.
If you were in charge, you would sack half the public sector. Is that right?
I would not sack half the public sector, but I would certainly do a number of things. I would reduce the public sector significantly, yes. If we were having serious austerity, like they're having across most of Europe, which is being forced upon them by the finances of those countries, which incidentally are not dissimilar to ours is coming, then we would be sacking by force a third to a half of the public sector.
OK, let me bring in Graham Cook, who's Research Director at the Institute for Public Policy Research and is listening to all of that. And you've got to respond, Graham.
Well, I mean, one of the problems with what Jonathan's just said is he's conflated together an enormous number.
Jonathan, once you do that with interest rates, you will pop thousands of people out of their houses straight away. You'll have a proper heavy metal recession, won't you?
You will take out the rubbish in the economy. And what you'll be doing is you'll no longer have the prudent, the savers, and those without debt bailing out the reckless. And this stuff about Japan, you're absolutely correct. These guys have been pumping money into the economy year after year for nearly 2 decades. They are now in their 24th year of recession by doing exactly the policies that the IMF, the Osborne, that the IPPR, the other chap there, they all want you to do. Keep on borrowing, keep on spending, because apparently that's the solution. I tell you, it's the opposite of the solution.
But public spending will fall by 16% in real terms. Public service spending will fall by 17% over the next 5 years. Why is government spending going up overall? It's because of inflation. It's because at some point the economy will grow. It's because social security is rising because of unemployment. It's because we have an ageing society, and so more people are claiming the state pension. I mean, Jonathan's proposal...
Just to say, we had figures in this week for December, and they said that we were borrowing £500 million a day in December. So we were spending, that's money we're spending, we're not taking in tax. It sounds like an awful lot.
Sure, we are borrowing too much. We've got to get the borrowing down. That means cutting expenditure. It means getting growth into the economy. So tax receipts return, and that is what the government's doing. I mean, personally, I think that they're in some senses going too far because they're squeezing growth out of the economy. And over time, obviously, you have to balance what you spend with what you bring in. But Jonathan's proposal is to burn the city to save the city, is to say that we need to, in 2 years, I don't know how he's going to reduce debt as a proportion of GDP in that time, unless he wants to abolish the NHS and tell all the pensioners that there's no income for them anymore. And it is a sort of crazy strategy rather than a balanced one, which says over time you need to control public expenditure, bring it down, get the economy growing and bring tax receipts up so you get rid of that deficit.
Go on, Jonathan, I can tell you want to come back in.
It is disingenuous of people who put words into the mouths of other people. You know, on one side of the political divide, you get these politicians saying we need growth. On the other side of the political divide, like the current governments, they say we're trying to get growth. I've got news for you and your listeners. You cannot get growth. It is impossible to get growth when you already owe, according to our size of economy, £1,000 billion, and that's only the debt that's on the balance sheet. Then there's the thousands of billions of pounds, which isn't even on the balance sheet. My point is very simple. Unless we move into deflationary policies rather than inflationary policies, unless we cut the costs of living and cut the costs of running businesses, we will constantly have to keep on borrowing and spending more, which will make it more and more difficult to actually sort the problem.
Thank you.
What your guy there is basically saying is we have to keep down this road because otherwise we'll have a problem. No, what we'll have is the solution. It's true. There will be a year or two of difficulty. Of that, I am saying it up front. But if we don't do that, I'm telling you, if we continue this policy, we're in a generation of depression.
Okay, great. Very quickly,
We've already
Graham.
had 6 years of no growth.
Well, Jonathan said he didn't want people to put words in each other's mouths, and he just said that I say we should carry on the same course. I agree the government's got to reduce the deficit, but levels of debt in this country are historically low compared to what they were in the post-war period. We had debt at 200% of GDP in the post-war period. It's now less than 100% of GDP. It has to be paid down over time, but the idea that you should make everyone bankrupt, cripple everyone's living expenses, cut out growth from the economy so that we can just arbitrarily bring down the debt to GDP ratio is bonkers.
Thank you very much indeed. Graham Cook, who is with the Institute for Public Policy Research, and Jonathan Davis, economist and wealth manager.